welcome everyone. We're glad to have you. Excited to be talking about Test Data Infrastructure Day. I think it's really interesting looking at some of the folks that are joining today and the breadth of roles and spaces that you all play in. I think there's a lot to be discussed and a lot to learn. So really excited for Adi and Nikolai to take us through and share a little bit of the insights that we've uncovered over the last period together. To take us through this is I will hand off to Adi and Nikolai. They're going to set up a bit of context as to why we're having this conversation today. We'll talk through a little bit about sort of where we've come from and how we got to today, and then talk a little bit about the future that we all are hoping to build towards for organizations like all of you. I'm Daniel. I'm going to be your MC, and as I mentioned, I'll keep things monitored from the Q&A perspective or any issues. But Adi and Nikolai, the floor is yours. Really excited to hear a little bit more about what you've all been working on. I'll be here in the background. If you two need anything from me, please let me know. Otherwise, the floor is yours, and we'll see you at the end. Thanks, guys.
Thank you there for that powerful introduction, Daniel. Thank you so much. And Nikolai, happy to meet you again, and really delighted to do this webinar along with Synthesized. And welcome to everyone in the webinar. Thanks for joining and showing interest. Before I get started with my quick introduction, I think this is a very interesting topic, right? It is interesting because when we talk about test data management in general, this is one problem statement which slips through the cracks usually. I think today is a time where we can give a right spotlight that it deserves, right? So before we get started with the webinar, the discussion, I will do a quick intro about myself. This is Adi here. I have about 2 decades of experience in IT industry, working as both technical and solution architect for numerous large enterprises, working on overcoming various IT challenges. Throughout my career, I worked as a data architect, data engineer, quality engineer on diverse data platform. In my current role, a VP of data COE in Qualitest, my focus is more of building the required confidence for our customer on the data through our unique solutions. So that is what we focus on. So Nikolai, over to you for your quick introduction.
Thank you, Adi. I'm Nikolai, CEO and founder of Synthesized, and I believe together we bring deep experience in AI, test data, and digital quality engineering. And today we'll be sharing insights, industry insights, solution approaches, and real-world use cases as well. We've been around. We'll tell a little bit about the company. Been with the company for almost 7 years now, and excited to show you what we have been, working on together with Adi here as well.
I think you could do a bit of intro on the Synthesized itself, Nikolai, if you can.
Yeah. A few words about the company. So we are AI-Infused test data automation company based out of London with offices in New York and operations globally. So we are working very closely with companies in the UK, EMEA, APAC, Japan, ANZ, and of course the USA. We provide instant, compliant, high-quality test data for regulated industry, specifically using intelligent QA agents. And our solutions accelerate testing, reduce costs, and support secure hybrid enterprise environments as well. Some of the customers and partners you can see here. So they include Deutsche Bank, UBS, and we work very closely with partners such as Microsoft, Google Cloud, and AWS as well. And ultimately, specializing a lot in test data automation, test case, making sure that test data fits its purpose in terms of covering all the possible test cases and data quality requirements, data integrity requirements, and we're going to talk a lot more about those today.
I'll work it out. But Qualitest, as 26+ years IT service company, we are specialized in AI-driven solutions across both quality and digital engineering space. With our global presence and a team of over 8,000 plus professionals working across 11 countries, our focus is delivering IT services in niche areas like AI, digital, blockchain, cloud, and data. Global analysts like Nelson and Forrester have continuously ranked us as a leader in the space. And we do a lot of work around data, and test data management is one of the core services that we offer. Right? I think while working on financial sector for across the globe, right, one thing what we are visibly seeing is there is as an industry, finance is undergoing like a significant technical modernization, right? Be it it's a cloud adoption or SaaS solutions or AI-infused apps, there is an accelerated adoption of these modern technologies. In fact, like recently saw a post from FCA from UK. They have launched the supercharged sandbox for financial institution to come in and safely research on their AI-driven solutions. It basically shows that the level of commitment that the industry shows in adopting modern technologies with the responsibly, right? The modern technologies in general like forces the IT operations today to like accelerate the way the software being built and delivered to production. I think IT operation, when we talk about a lot of functions like infrastructure, application development, has moved forward with modern approaches and accelerating the delivery. But when it comes to testing, it always been considered to be a slow in the process, dragging the whole a part of delivering the software faster. But I think lately testing is also like brought in a lot of quality engineering aspect, starting from shift left, implementing continuous automation and autonomous automation. Even in fact, like we use a lot of AI to improve the efficiency of how we do testing in general. But while testing is also getting modernized, but one thing I see is when it comes to like test data, it is still like have a high dependency on production data copies and also like the manual refresh that we perform, manual refresh that periodically needs to be performed on this environment. I think with that approach is kind of like very difficult to meet some of the critical requirement that specifically finance industry has in place, right? Especially when you look at compliance, right? The compliance is one of the area like where it is continue to evolve faster, right? It's not more about like providing protection of your personal data. It is moving beyond like regulations like FSMA and Basel mandates your IT system to be tested for resiliency and also for like adverse impacts to prove its stability for your customer. The PSD2 MIFD regulations also mandates to like create the transparency of the data that you use and how you share that data with the third parties. So compliance is one of the core aspects that finance industry requires, but it's not just compliance, right? It is also the requirement around the data itself is like becoming more complex. It's not just about like whenever we talk about TDM, we always equal that to data masking and data subsetting. I think what we have to look at here is it's not just about getting a subsetted data available in a testing environment. It is more about like providing a fit for purpose data that reflects the real world complexities. Think of a data scarcity and edge cases, the need for diverse data type across system, and growing demand for contextually relevant test data for fraud detection, testing of your AI models. Traditional tools, obviously, like they can't handle at this level of complexity. And also when you're dealing with a manual process and a semi-automated process for test data, it kind of like requires significant infrastructure investment, license, and resourcing also. Not to state that the inefficiency it creates and the delays it creates in the test cycle process itself. So our experience working with various customers at least like around 500K to like 1.5 million is spent by larger enterprises just providing test data for their testing functions, which is a huge thing to like look at and see like how we can optimize, right? I think, Nicola, you would have worked, I'm sure like you would have worked with multiple customers. What is the observation you had? Is it like similar to what we are showing up here?
I want to double down on the complex requirements as well. And the finance industry is really facing serious test data challenges right now. So causing delays, compliance risks, and poor data quality. And we see that a lot of applications were built many years ago, and they require maintenance, they require upgrades, they require modernization, whether it's core banking, capital markets, HR, CRM systems. So it's no longer just one sort of monolith app, right? So, and you see this a lot as well. You see microservices, applications connected to each other. One part of that microservice was built, maybe many years ago, and you need to build a new feature here, and you need to ensure that in your test environments, test data, you maintain all that integrity. And unfortunately, what we see is over 83% of firms report test data delays due to data availability, test data availability, and 36% have faced penalties from test data, data mishandling and using production data, sensitive data in the test environments, which is basically sensitive data mishandling. At the same time, because of these new requirements and very complex landscapes, legacy approaches are no longer sufficient for today's agile and regulated environments. Especially the companies right now need to embrace AI, need to embrace cloud, but many test environments still, from the past, and all of that needs to be updated. And we see this a lot across, regulated industries where it's really, really hard to innovate and really, really hard to introduce modernization and new technologies, new applications into the landscape.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think a lot of our customers, like they went and bought enterprise level TDM tools, which can do many of the test data refresh process automatically. But when they are in the journey of modernizing their IT systems, the tool sets or the solutions that they earlier thought about is not becoming relevant for their future vision, right? They are looking at the solution that they already have in place. I think that, but that being said, right, I think the way we got here, we have to look at like how we really get here. Like whatever we do with production copies today, we can't like take that as like a simple solution. So there has been a lot of maturity that had happened on that approach to like to have a solution that we have in place, which still works, right? Many of the customer like, why do I bother moving around? Like when I have my production copies ready, and then I'm able to, it is working, and my testing team is using it. But there are like hidden challenges around like these approach is never like come to the light, right? So we kind of looked at this as a market player. We looked at it from a holistic view, how the TDM as a solution has evolved, right? TDM and the underlying IT system landscape is closely related, right? Every new architecture that we brought in, like whether from mainframe to like client server architecture, or on-premise to like cloud and microservices based architecture, every architecture brought a new approach to how we deal with the test data management problem. But at the same time, we also introduced some limitations around that. So now that like we are talking about cloud native and breakthroughs such as generative AI and agent AI systems are changing faster than ever, right? Creating an exciting opportunity for building new applications and new systems and connect your customers better. But at the same time, it brings the strict requirements around compliance and security, demands for like more thorough testing of your system before you can actually deploy them, right? So this is the point like where we have to start thinking about like, how do I move from a point in time data copies to more intelligent on-demand and AI-driven test data management solutions, right? I think that's where the future is taking us. But if you think about like, can AI solve everything in terms of test data management, is something like we need to carefully evaluate, because while it is certain that AI can give you those opportunities and flexibilities, AI itself is not in certain 100% certain about the output that is delivering, right? So whatever the AI models that we are using, every model has a built-in uncertainty which needs to be validated thoroughly, right? We can't simply ignore those risks and bring in AI to solve the problem, right? I think you being like AI native solution synthesized, how do you see like AI playing out in your product, Nikolai?
I think we can almost be this slide, almost like have an exponential curve, right? So, so like to your point, the test data requirements have been around for many years, and test data management has evolved from manual data creation in the 50s to today's sort of AI-driven self-service infrastructure. And even 5 years ago and 7 years ago, I remember companies were still using data virtualization, rule-based data generation, data privacy anonymization. Then about obviously 5 years ago, we saw a lot of AI-driven capabilities, and right now we have agents. So right now with the agents, we can actually build very intelligent machines which can look at the requirements, combine those requirements into very concrete test data scripts, test case scripts, and really build a lot of automation along the way. And this is what modern testing requires, right? It requires faster provisioning, regulatory compliance, and coverage for diverse scenarios. And that was virtually impossible 10 years ago. And right now, what we see is AI transforming how we approach the DM, right? So making it integrated, making it scalable, making it continuous, part of the overall landscape, and making sure it's also intelligent, so it really knows what test data should look like. What we also saw at the beginning when we entered the space around 7 years ago, that TDM was sort of perceived as a master data management SKU, right? So which like, hey, we have a database, we need to do some transformation on top of it, and mask it, subset it, maybe virtualize it. But as a result of that, you kind of almost like forget about the actual use case, which is development, testing, etc. And we saw a lot of disconnect between this kind of MDM space and the testing space, and lots of data, lots of testing exercises, test data management components were actually not fit for purpose, because you end up, hey, I've got this test database, but my application breaks, and I don't know why it breaks. Is it because the application is wrong, or because the data itself does not really take into account the application sort of business roles, all different APIs, all different microservices? And this is what we see AI is really helping us to do, to understand what it means for test data to be fit for purpose, and really bridging that gap between the MDM sort of space and really the testing component. And definitely AI is massively disrupting this, and this is exactly what we started adopting some time ago, and you see massive results, and with customers already understanding this, bridging this gap as well. 100%. I think we want to really double down on AI reinventing test data management and what that means, right? So really see the shift from test data generation from static rule-based systems to context-aware generative models, and really it enhances lots of things along the way, right? So AI-powered test data generation, smart sensitive data detection, anonymization, adaptive and self-healing. This is very important, because with applications change every month, sometimes every sprint, right? And it's very important to adapt to schema changes, data set changes, and all this is really hard to do in a manual fashion. It takes time and it's expensive. So AI here is really helping to auto adapt to schema and data set changes. And of course, edge case analysis with traditional tooling. Right, so with the legacy TDM tooling, as mentioned, the focus was always on, hey, let me just mask my database or generate some database or subset some database and see what happens. Well, but that not really helps improve test coverage, because ultimately from the application release perspective, from the quality assurance, what you want is to just make sure that application is fully covered with tests are fully covered with test scenarios, and test scenarios are fully covered with test data scenarios. And for all of that, you really have to be using a lot of intelligence, and AI is really helping to streamline this. I often speak to customers from insurance industries, financial services industries, and we ask them, oh, how do you manage your test cases? And they were like, hey, we use this Jira board, and there are thousands of different test cases in there. And then we ask, okay, how do you actually populate those test cases with reliable test data? How does it actually connect? And they're like, oh yeah, good question. So this currently done manually. So we have a team doing that, populating all those test cases with test data and see how it's gonna effectively work in production. No, I was just covering this 4 components here and demonstrating well through the
I think this is a slide where I would like to introduce you how traditionally there are 2 different routes to TDM solutions, right? One is organically creating the test data itself, which went through its own evolvement of manually creating the data, and then ad hoc scripting got applied, and then rule-based generations that was applied. The other school of thought was to take a copy of the production data and perform the subsetting and masking. And also there are in between enterprise solution which tried to combine these features together, right? But still they created a high cost solution which still required a lot of manual effort and configuration effort to deliver them. In middle of there is where we got AI influence around all the products. So often we perform a lot of analysis on market products, whether it is commercial or open source. We see all products and tools they have AI influence, right? And especially with the invention of Gen AI, it becomes much easier for the common person to leverage AI, right? So then a lot of people started using ChatGPT type Gen AI, create a prompt, simple prompt, and generate a data. Is that the solution that is scalable for enterprise level test data generation? If you look at it, you're going to get no. I mean, across the board, the answer is going to be no, right? Because LLM has its own power, right? But LLM is not the only model that's going to be helpful for data generation, right? So starting from your traditional models a statistical model like Cup-Laws, GMM, and Monte Carlo type tools, they helped. Even a lot of open source tools adopt them to generate data. But most of these tools, including the generative AIs using neural network like GAN, they can work well with your numeric and categorical data sets. But when it comes to open text is where you will have faced a lot of challenges, right? I think that's where you can't just simply take an AI and produce the data that is you needed. You need to have some level of a operational approach to how you apply the AI in building this data generation. And on top of it, you also look at the output produced by these AI models, how trustable it is. How do you ensure you prove the relevancy of the data that is being generated out of this, right? So that aspect needs to be seriously considered, right? So I think that's where I had a question also, synthesized using heavy AI models. How do you make sure the data that you're generating or masking is still relevant and meets the purpose, Nikolai?
Yeah, 100%, Adi. And I think it's important to always think about what that means to have test data which is fit for purpose, right? And that you normally you have a lot of different test cases, right? And they're basically in some sort of test case management system, or they're in sort of even in your traditional sort of generalized sort of generic system like Jira, right? And what's important is test data really needs to help you guarantee quality assurance, right? So you don't want to have just generic, random, fake data which is gonna tell you something, because you, as before, you don't really know whether your application is wrong, whether test cases are wrong, or maybe data is actually meaningless. And it's very important to look at not only the structure of your application, your databases, but also all the business rules, right? All the connections between different APIs, and if it's a microservice between different applications, right? And this is a very, very different paradigm, and it's almost like a domain-specific paradigm. And from that perspective, from the AI point of view, it's very important to look at those as the criteria for understanding what test data looks like. And this is exactly what we do, right? So we ensure that test data really meets those complex requirements, meets the business application rules, meets the data rules, and maintaining that that fidelity, so that you can be sure that, hey, it's definitely not, test environment, test data, test cases are properly covered. So let's look at the application, right? So what can be done? What can be improved? And we've seen so many companies not doing it well, because like ultimately, again, like if you just mask your database or just generate some random data, you never know whether, where the problem lies, right? So you almost like want to kind of, eliminate problem, one by one, and then really, narrow down where the issues may be in the application, and focus on fixing that, focus on improving that, bringing that faster to market, make it continuous. And this is exactly what we do by providing those domain-specific models, domain-specific intelligence to improve the fidelity of test data, the relevance of test data and test environments, so that they super optimized, of very low cost, and of very high coverage for the test cases you have in place.
Absolutely. I think what you're saying is really clear, right? AI can definitely provide a lot of powerful capabilities for you, but at the same time, it's very important to understand its risks that are associated with it, right? So there are a lot of AI models that are available in terms of evaluating the output produced by AI, right? So whether it is a column distribute stability or correlation stability, there are standard evaluation methods also being provided when the data generation solution is being published, right? So I think we have to give a careful thought around how do we evaluate the output. There should be a structured way to do it. The other AI use cases I see is how do we identify the privacy information? I think this is also not simple. First of all, you can't just give all your metadata or a sample data through the LLM, right? LLM can't solve everything immediately. You have to think about what is your a definition of your data that exists in your enterprise, right? So if your data sets are very cryptic, like one of the customer where we were working, all the column names were cryptically named, right? There is no associated business glossary or terminology to it, right? Even AI cannot really figure out what does that data really means. So there are earlier we used regular expression patterns. That is pretty much rule-based, I would consider. And then you have this named entity resolution, but still it was using for open text. When it comes to a tabular data, it also fell short of it, right? So LLM can do it, but what you have to do is you have to ensure you build the metadata, a proper metadata along with it, and then use the LLM power to identify the PII information. I think this, more than considering this to be an area of tedium, I would recommend this to be considered a problem to be solved by a data governance team, where they build a centralized repository to create knowledge around the data sets. So once you have that, it becomes much more centrally controlled and AI-driven identification of PII to be used within your TDM sub-processes, right? That is one area. The other use cases how do you identify your adaptive schema changes? That is another area we can use AI. and also especially around edge case analysis, basically like doing an exploratory analysis around your data. You can use AI to effectively automate the exploration of the data, the profiling of the data, what is the distribution of the data looks like, which used to we used to use a lot of complex SQL statement and queries earlier. If you have like a template built out of AI, I think this is an area where you can effectively use AI to help you and support you with accelerating the activities. I think anything beyond, I mean, I'm just covering only the top use cases here. There are many other possibilities. Any other use cases that you are thinking about, Nikolai?
Look, I think it's ultimately, to me, it's almost like, hey, what metric are we optimizing, right? So to me, it's almost like, hey, we're optimizing, we're trying to automate as many steps as we can, right? As part of the process, we are trying to improve productivity, right? So we're trying to reduce cost. We're trying to bring applications faster to market of high quality, and then prioritizing those and leveraging AI to maximize those metrics as much as we can, right? And definitely from the AI perspective, it's really building autonomous ways of bringing those connecting those together, integrating those components together, and ultimately maximizing that return on investment, right? And that's basically how we think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think while we're thinking about the technical use cases, right, but what more important is like how it applies to the business, especially for the finance sector, right? It's quite obvious, like the easiest example that we can give is like, okay, you can deal with your GDPR and FCA regulations and compliance requirement by not using the production copies, rather like you use a machine generated data for your purpose. But more than that, like in case like you want to test out your fraudulent transactions, generally like when you look at your real data set or production data, you may not have the sufficient data that is required to perform that kind of an testing. So that's where like models, AI models like SMOT and adaptive synthetic sampling can generate a required level of data for you to like bridge that gap. And also like in case of edge scenarios like testing surface water flooding or like liquidity drops causing trade rejections, you could use models like tabular diffusion model or LLM generative models to basically like understand what is the data set that you have in place and identify the distributions and come up with the suggestions for you to like consider for your edge cases, which is some of the mandates from FSMA and the other Basel regulations that you can resolve. So have you come across anything, this sort of requirements which can be solved, a business program, problems that can be solved through AI, Nikolai?
100%. I think there are three major initiatives, right? So we are kind of seeing across a variety of different verticals and customers, and they're really around cloud modernization, sort of cloud adoption, application modernization, and upgrades, right? So where you want to move either from one app to another, whether you want to upgrade one version of your app to another, or you want to move to the cloud, right? And they then can be broken down into very specific use cases around maintaining data integrity, maintaining relevance of kind of maintaining automation of testing of those apps in different different setups, agility, edge case coverage, and also lots of data migration exercises. There are very interesting events happening, as Adi, as well, in the SAP world, right? So we have Guidewire, we have Workday, right? And all of this are incredibly massive use cases, and all of them require automation, because you can't just migrate from one version of Guidewire to another without checking and making sure that it's integrated properly into all of your other apps, checking all the APIs, checking all the test environments, making sure the schemas, all the data is up to date, etc. And with AI, we can actually accelerate a lot of this by building those autonomous systems to automate as many steps of the testing process and specifically test data process. And ultimately, AI helps a lot with faster data preparation, right? So you mentioned some ROIs here, right? So it's time to market, right? So it's automation, it's cost reduction, right? So we want to make sure that companies don't spend time on manual data refreshes, right? So we literally earlier this week spoke with a customer who was spending millions a year on manual data refresh, right? Because you need to make sure your environment sensing, right? So you're doing something reasonable in the UAT, and all this is very nicely aligned. But a lot of this is done manually, and that's taking a lot of time, taking a lot of basically cost and etc. So from the other perspective, test data preparation is also incredibly important, right? So you want to make sure that you always have what you need. You don't almost like kind of put noise in your test environment, right? So you always want to ensure that all that is fit for purpose, and ultimately just maximizing the output whilst minimizing the cost. And that's across the legacy systems, but also across your in-house build apps, right? So with a typical company, you have so many different apps which are just built in-house, right? But the problem is the same, right? So the metrics are the same, and yes, so we see this across basically very similar patterns across our customers right now.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I think what I was saying is I don't know how what part you have heard me, but the test environment builds the infrastructure really faster, but hands over to the TDM engineering team. But they take a longer time to do the refresh because there is a complex data and its integration and the data integrity itself, which takes a lot of time. But we can't just simply say like, okay, remove all those dependencies, just bring in AI. I think at least till this IT landscape get modernized, you still have to live with a hybrid approach of like augmenting some of your production data with AI generated data, and also continue to leverage where a production copy is going to be really useful, right? But either way, bringing in AI is going to like really provide you that acceleration that you're looking for. I think, yeah, I like this slide when you gave me, like, I was trying to think over like, how is it really fit into test data? But I think you're having a holistic view of how we should look at testing, not test data as an isolated function. We have to look at the context of how do we perform the testing, how do we bring in the data, and how we integrate the data with the current automation, right? Oftentimes what happens is we have an automation already. When I ask a team to like go ahead and kickstart the automation framework, they tell me like, no, we have to like plug in the test data manually before we can actually run the automation. So what we have to see is how do we provision this data continuously and integrate it with the overall testing is the critical piece that we need to solve, right? I believe that's the intention of this slide, but maybe you can add more points on this one.
No, 100%. I think it's very important to put things in the context, right? So, and how test data connects to your test cases, to continuous QA infrastructure, accelerates the overall time to market. And this is something we spend a lot of time on, right? Because you have all kinds of systems companies use for test case management, right? And obviously even Qualitest has some capabilities, some strong capabilities there as well. And it's very important to make sure all this is very nicely connected to ultimately drive the return on investment, right? Ultimately for all the partners and customers I work with, it's very important to always think about the return on investment, the payback, and everything, right? And all this is achievable when things very nicely synchronized and built in such a way that they are driving that value, right? So to the end users, to the business as well. And we already spoke about automation, cost reduction, faster testing cycles. And this is, a way to think about this is in a modern landscape, how this is, orchestrated by meaning of, testing agents, test data, test cases, continuous QA infrastructure, all working together and providing that value to the organization.
So I think we talked enough about the challenges it has and how AI can be successfully leveraged in some of the use cases. But what we have to look at is how do we move forward, right? One of the things when we are consulting our customer, like what we propose is the TDM solution is not just about using the AI, right? We have to look at this in a holistic way with some gating principles, right? So we strongly recommend a data security first approach to your TDM, right? So basically think about where and all you will have a risk with respect to data security and privacy data, what is the possible areas that you could avoid using sensitive data and then leverage AI generated data sets. And also it's not just getting the data, it is also proving the overall quality and relevance of the data, right? That's where a lot of this evaluation methods that I talked about earlier, whether you use AI-based evaluation or automated way of evaluating, whether the data that you're providing is still relevant and usable for the tester, right? So what I heard is 80% of the time when tester looks for the right data, they struggle to find the right data combinations and conditions to be used for their testing. So that is really important. The other principles, some of them borrowed from DevOps principles. I think Nikolai was pointing out about how do you provide test data infrastructure, which works closely with building out the test environment itself, right? So how do we integrate seamlessly the data generation process and the data provisioning process as part of your test data environment build out? And whatever you're building needs to be autonomous and also self-serviceable, right? Oftentimes what happens is we think about more on the back-end side of the problem, engineering side of the problem. We have to consider what are the challenges that test data consumer has from his perspective. You could have got all the data in the lower environment, but the consumer will find it very difficult to have a visibility of what data exists and what are the data they can use without having a conflict between the multiple testers, right? So when I say tester, I'm not just narrowing to the functional tester here, right? A developer also needs test data. A business tester needs test data, and also a data scientist who is building out model and testing out his model, he will also need data. I think that's where you have to think about an AI-infused, a self-serviceable portal where they can easily identify the relevant data that needs to be used. In case of that data is not available, there should be an option for them to request to generate data on demand, right? So we call it self-service portal, which is enabled with the API layer, which can be integrated with your automation frameworks also. That is all on the consumer side. We still need to improvise, but the engineering side, when you look at it, so we have to augment our approach, existing approach of taking production data and masking them, phase out the level of production data that you would need in your environment, and then slowly bring in a synthetic data or a data generation through a machine learning to replace the production data usage, right? So we have to do that slowly, and then also enable the DevOps way of integrating with your deployment scripts. That way, it becomes completely seamless from an engineering point of view also. I think together, we call it as the test data infrastructure, not just talking about your lower environment, and also layer sitting on top of it, providing that visibility for the data consumer is how I was looking at this. Nikolai, what's your thoughts and take on this? Do you agree with the approach?
Yeah, the future of TDM lies in autonomous AI-infused platforms, guided by security, quality, and modern DevOps principles. And key capabilities, as you mentioned here, are really around self-service test data provisioning, autonomous PII detection, and continuous feedback loops. So whether it's on-prem or SaaS, So in our case, we really spend time on flexible deployments and zero downtime onboarding as well. So those are very, very important from the modern sort of enterprise requirements right now.
Yeah, I think someone might think like, okay, all this good, like, is it really like implementable, right? Is that being implemented anywhere? Like, I think that's where like we have a couple of case studies where we can talk about like where these has been successfully implemented. I think one of the case studies, both the case studies are from Synthesized. Do you want to give a bit of a background or like how you solve the customer problem with this approach, Nikolai?
Yeah, 100%. I think here just couple of examples, right? So in the insurance domain, and also in investment banking, right? So and from the reinsurance domain, so we work with a global reinsurer to reduce test data storage by over 5x and test effort significantly using the platform. At the same time, the client had over 44 different systems and previously relied heavily on production data and creating compliance risks. And in this case, we really delivered the test data as a service by ensuring that the test data meets quality requirements, compliance requirements, and also available on demand, and ultimately helping company automate application release, automate many steps in the application testing, reduce cost, and ultimately also drive the quality assurance for that. With the investment bank, the focus here was on the basically providing regulatory compliant test data and accelerate time to market. So we enabled access to both technical and non-technical users, and ultimately democratizing test data usage. So here key outcomes basically were around improved coverage by over 70%. In fact, actually even more, and data generation time reduced significantly to literally just seconds to provide the high quality test data output for the test environments. With all this work, we currently also expanding massively into the in the UK and India. So some of the names I kind of mentioned already, right? So UBS, Deutsche Bank, European Commission as well. So they just actually published some very, very interesting case study in the paper working with us as well. So there is lots of work happening, and ultimately, look, any company has, well, all enterprise companies have applications that need to be tested, and all of that requires test data, test environment, test cases, and that's, it's basically, we haven't seen a company which just says, hey, let's just, release and see what happens, right? And this is just, real examples and real outcomes we have already provided.
We're particularly curious as to sort of how has this resonated, some of the challenges and efforts, that initiatives that Adi and Nikolai went through in the presentation. Are these similar things to what you all are experiencing on the ground in your organizations? This would be something that we would love to hear from you all as well. And maybe I will cue us off, or maybe ask a question if people are still thinking. Nikolai and Adi, what are you most excited about for organizations that choose to embark on this journey of testing and test data?
Look, I think AI is really gonna transform the entire test data management industry, and I'm super excited about bringing a lot of AI automation capabilities to the basically help with different use cases, whether it's application modernization, whether it's an upgrade, right? So whether it's cloud transformation initiative, there's just so much to do, and just really exciting to see the just so much efficiencies and so much basically benefits, and we can provide, and costs we can save, and basically automating really manual processes which are which are out there, but everyone does it, but nobody really wants to do them. And it's really exciting to providing so much AI automation to alleviate some of those pains.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, right, definitely it opens up a large opportunity for us, right? Especially like it's a right time for, especially for finance industry, like where they are into like modernizing their IT landscape, like breaking down their legacy platform into microservices. I think this is the time like they can come up with on-demand data services, right? Not like waiting for weeks and weeks to do the data refresh, rather like do the data refresh as they build out the systems. That way, like the agile way of developing their individual products will get fully enabled when they are completely migrated into the modern architecture, at least while they are trying to move to the modern architecture. And this is a great possibility to leverage, right? But at the same time, I want to also be skeptical to like evaluate and understand the risk associated with AI, using AI for data generation. So make sure like the data that is being masked using AI or generated using AI, make sure like you have a proper evaluation methods to prove its quality and relevancy, is what my take is, Daniel.
Absolutely, and I think that's part of the area that Synthesized can help with in terms of making sure that there's reporting on the back end to do those analysis. We actually had a couple questions come in, so this is great. As we're getting to the end, thank you all for staying a little bit over. But the first one is, what would you suggest to an organization who is yet to start this test data journey? Where should they begin?
Okay, where to they begin? It depends on like where they are at this point, right? Basically, like you have to think what is your maturity level and assess what are the capabilities that your organization built in terms of the test data management, and then have a clear understanding of AI and the usage of AI, right? Don't just jump on because you have heard about Gen AI. Gen AI can do this wonderful thing, but you have to have a proper literacy around AI, at least some level, right? And then build out your roadmap. You have your current capability that is assessed. What are the gaps? Build out your opportunities and roadmap, and block those boxes where you can effectively apply AI, right? You can't just bring in AI everywhere. What is the most impactful area that can bring in your benefits quickly? So mark that, flag that, color it as AI, and then execute using that roadmap is how I will recommend them to go about it. If you are not sure about what is your capabilities, current capabilities are, you have to bring in an expert or a consultant who can actually do that assessment for you and lay out the roadmap, and then you can from there take up for the implementation itself.
100% agree.
Nice. And then maybe one to close us off, and then we can wrap this up. But Nikolai, you might have some insights here, and given the sort of the product roadmap that you've been working on. But for the group, how much will agentic AI impact the traditional TDM test data practices?
Look, 100%. I think agents can really supercharge the TDM, right? And we see this already with with the customers. So it's really the whole process, right? So from understanding the requirements to arranging the test data, then making sure it's fit for purpose, and guaranteeing then it's going to be effectively used in the testing cycle. And yeah, super excited about it.
Thank you both so much for your time today. Really insightful stuff, Adi, Nikolai, and everyone. Thank you both so much. We will speak to you all soon. You'll get a recording following, and we hope to speak with all of you in short order. But thank you so much, everybody, and have a great.
Thank you. Bye-bye.